small guideline of what his authorities are, and you give up all that authority, well, what's he going to become? A dictator. Even if you get to vote him in, he's still a dictator because he can do whatever he wants. We went to war in Libya, and the president said this will be a matter of days and not weeks, and
here we are weeks into it, and it looks like we're looking at months or who knows now how long.
Well, we're already a couple months into it, and he had the 60-day rule that Congress supposedly passed, said if the president uses any war powers, that he has to come back to Congress and tell them why that we're involved in the conflict and how long we're going to be there, and then get authorization to stay there. Those 60 days came and went, and he never said a thing.
Well, and even then, focusing on and yielding that 60 days, I think is a mistake, because I don't see 60 days anywhere in the Constitution. No. I see the Constitution saying very clearly that the war powers are supposed to be reserved for Congress.
Exactly. No, I agree wholeheartedly. The 60 days has nothing to do with it. But even if you look at that and give them that, he still hasn't done that. There is no rule of law in the United States of America. None. Rule of law has to start at the top, the executive branch, the congressional branch. The court has to have rule of law. There is no rule of law. The court hasn't stepped in and said, Mr. President, you can't do this. This is unconstitutional. Congress hasn't stepped in and said, Mr. President, you cannot do this. This is our authority. And the president, of course, is going, yes, I can. Yes, we can.
All right, we have the speech here now, Ron Paul's floor speech on May 25th, just a couple days ago. It's called The Last Nail. Are you ready for it?
Yeah.
All right, it's about 5 minutes long.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The last nail is being driven into the coffin of the American Republic, yet Congress remains in total denial as our liberties are rapidly fading before our eyes. The process is propelled by unwarranted fear and ignorance as to the true meaning of liberty. It is driven by economic myths, fallacies, and irrational good intentions. The rule of law is constantly rejected, and authoritarian answers are offered as panaceas for all our problems. Runaway welfareism is used to benefit the rich at the expense of the middle class. Who would have ever thought that the current generation and Congress would stand idly by and watch such a rapid disintegration of the American Republic? Characteristic of this epic event is the casual acceptance by the people and the political leaders of the unitary presidency, which is equivalent to granting dictatorial powers to the president. Our presidents can now, on their own, order assassinations, including American citizens, operate secret military tribunals, engage in torture, enforce indefinite imprisonments without due process, order searches and seizures without proper warrants, gutting the Fourth Amendment, ignore the 60-day rule for reporting to the Congress the nature of any military operation as required by the War Powers Resolution, continue the Patriot Act abuses without oversight, wage war at will, treat all Americans as suspected terrorists at airports with TSA groping and nude X-raying. And the Federal Reserve accommodates by counterfeiting the funds needed and not paid for by taxation and borrowing, permitting runaway spending, endless debt, and special interest bailouts. And all of this is not enough. The abuses and usurpations of the war power are soon to be codified in the National Defense Authorization Act, now rapidly moving its way through Congress. Instead of repealing the 2001 authorization for the use of military force, as we should, now that bin Laden is dead and gone, Congress is planning to massively increase the war power of the president. Though an opportunity presents itself to end the wars in Iraq, Afghanistan, and Pakistan, Congress, with bipartisan support, obsesses on how to expand the unconstitutional war power of the president he already holds. The current proposal would allow a president to pursue war anytime, any place, for any reason, without congressional approval. Many believe this would even permit military activity against American suspects here at home. The proposed authority does not reference the 9/11 attacks. It would be expanded to include the Taliban and associated forces, a dangerously vague and expansive definition of our potential enemies. There is no denial that the changes in Section 1034 totally eliminates the hard-fought-for restraint on presidential authority to go to war without congressional approval achieved at the Constitutional Convention. Congress's war authority has been severely undermined since World War II, beginning with the advent of the Korean War, which was fought solely under a UN resolution. Even today, we're waging war in Libya without even consulting with the Congress, similar to how we went to war in Bosnia in the 1990s under President Clinton. The three major reasons for our constitutional conventions were to guarantee free trade and travel among the states, make gold and silver legal tender, and abolish paper money, and strictly limit the executive branch's authority to pursue war without congressional approval. But today, Federal Reserve notes are legal tender, gold and silver are illegal. The Interstate Commerce Clause is used to regulate all commerce at the expense of the free trade among the states. And now, the final nail is placed in the coffin of congressional responsibility for the war power, delivering this power completely to the President, a sharp and huge blow to the concept of our republic. In my view, it appears that the fate of the American Republic is now sealed, unless these recent trends are quickly reversed. The saddest part of this tragedy is that all these horrible changes are being done in the name of patriotism and protecting freedom. They are justified by good intentions while believing the sacrifice of liberty is required for our safety. Nothing could be further from the truth. More sadly is the conviction that our enemies are driven to attack us for our freedoms and prosperity, and not because of our deeply flawed foreign policy that has generated justifiable grievances and has inspired the radical violence against us. Without this understanding, our endless, unnamed, and undeclared wars will continue, and our wonderful experiment with liberty will end. And I yield back the balance of my time.
And that was Ron Paul in a speech that he gave on what day of the week was that? This last week. It was on the 25th. What day of the week is that?
When he had
Wednesday
that speech,
this week?
yes.
Okay.
I had a little quote from C.S. Lewis that goes a long way with what Representative Paul just said, who I hope really does win the presidency. C.S. Lewis said, "Of all tyrannies, a tyranny exercised for the good of its victims may be the most oppressive. It may be better to live under robber barons than under omnipotent moral busybodies. The robber baron's cruelty may sometimes sleep. His cupidity may at some point be satisfied. But those who torment us for our own good will torment us without end, for they do it with the approval of their own conscience." Which I think is exactly what we have with the Patriot Act, and what Ron Paul was just saying, and what Benjamin Franklin says when he says those who give up freedoms for temporary security deserve neither. And what we have is a Congress. We have basically what it comes down to is we, the American people, we're the problem. We let the government, the United States, our state governments, our local governments tread on us, push us into the dirt, tromp all over our liberties, all for the sake of protecting us, all for the sake of taking care of us, all for the sake of our own good. And those are obviously the worst kinds. Well, Steve walked out of the room here, so we can make fun of him for a while. We have a...
What do you got?
Is that a call?
You want to try the phones? We can do
Yeah,
that.
there's someone there.
458-TALK is the number. They didn't hold, so there you have it.
That was quick.
Yeah, well, here's the thing, Josh, as we're looking, and Aaron too, as we're looking at what's going on right now with like a lone voice crying in the wilderness with somebody like Ron Paul. He's been marginalized by his own party.
Yes.
He's been mocked by the national media. People who are Ron Paul supporters, very often, they don't just stick with the Constitution. They also roll in these other things like legalizing marijuana and other issues that kind of make people, quote unquote, normal people back off and say, well, maybe I don't want to be a Ron Paul supporter myself.
Well, they hit the quote unquote religious conservatives because they say, oh, he wants to legalize prostitution. Oh, he wants to legalize all drugs. No, he wants us to follow the Constitution and have the states do their role as a state government and regulate them at a state level, which is what they're supposed to do, because the Congress of the United States has no authority in the Constitution to regulate prostitution, to regulate gambling, to regulate drugs. I mean, we can go on for probably another week straight of what they do not have authority to regulate, but they use the almighty Commerce Clause to do whatever they want, while our state governments sit back and cry and moan
and state government does a pretty good job of regulating this.
Oh yeah, we don't believe in this new thing of having states' rights, where people want state nullification and all that. It's we need to just think about one thing: individual liberty. And that's it.
Well, and that's one of the things too, is that when you're talking about individual liberty or anything that has to do with when the state should step in and regulate, if you're not hurting somebody else, if you're not interfering with somebody else's rights, what business is it of the state to tell you whether or not you can do something? That really is the business of a church. And unless we're going to have some kind of a national religion in which the state is our priest and tells us how we can be saved.
Our national religion is the state.
We'll be right back after the Fox News.
Yes, FAR, local talk radio.
Fox News Radio, I'm Brett Larson. The death toll now at 139 following Sunday's massive Joplin, Missouri tornado that packed winds near 200 miles per hour. State officials still digging through debris searching for survivors.
We have 142 human remains, but that includes partial remains. Some of those remains may be the same person.
Deputy Director of Public Safety Andrea Spillers. Wet weather moving into the northern Rockies in the next few days could be trouble in Montana, which is already dealing with flooding.
What our attention turns to is looking at the record snowpack that we have for this time of year, and we've been watching that for a couple of months, and that's what people have really been focused on is trying to make sure that record snowpack comes out without any issues.
Keith Meyer with the National Weather Service. Montana has been dealing with flooding now for the past 2 weeks. Fox News, we report, you decide.
Don't let your coworkers call it hate radio just because we question authority. We are KFAR, and we will keep on critiquing regardless of who's in power.
You take a mortal man and put him in control.
Let's just say, for sake of argument, that we take a mortal man and put him in control. And what happens then? We
watch him become a god. Watch the people's heads roll. The great Messiah, the chosen one, Obama. And, we don't want to act like we're just picking on President Obama, because we're not. The poor guy, he's just fallen in the footsteps of his predecessors, of George W. Bush, Clinton, Herbert Walker Bush. How far back should we go? All the way back to Kennedy, probably?
It has to go back to Kennedy. I mean, the whole issue of the expansive actually has to go back to Truman.
Oh, yeah, Truman. Well, Roosevelt. Let's hit Roosevelt up a little bit. Yeah, actually, let's just talk about Abraham Lincoln.
Yeah. I mean, how big? At some point, the further back you go, it's like skinning an onion. You start peeling it back, and it's like, well, where does it stop? And it stops with the Constitution.
Well, there were always people, though, in history, in our history, that actually spoke out against the president, against what Congress was doing. And what we're facing now is that no one, besides Ron Paul.
That's me letting you know that we've got a lot of phones on hold over there. Did you like that effect? All right, 458 Talk is the number.